Anyone who says Pixar is just for kids deserves to be locked in a room where they blare those opening 10 minutes of Up for like 6 hours. The company knows how to deliver great-looking animated kids films that threaten to tear our heart out and stomp all over it. That takes a lot of skill. And seriously, we adults probably cry way more than kids do when watching these movies. Want me to prove it? Here's a breakdown of the most emotional moments that adults will cry at in Pixar movies. Let's get started right now. Okay, did anyone laugh in Toy Story 3 when Andy finds Woody in the box for Bonnie, then Bonnie reaches for the cowboy and Andy instinctively pulls him out of her reach? I don't know, that moment was always weirdly comedic for me, which means its emotional gut punch that comes next is even more impressive. Andy goes into a monologue about how great of a toy Woody is, and if Woody wasn't bound by some mystical toy code to stay still, you'd imagine he'd start breaking down in cowboy tears in Andy's hand. Then, with Andy playing with Bonnie for a bit before driving away to college and adulthood, with Woody saying his "so long, partner," it just reduces all the adults into weepy puddles of tears on the floor.
So long, partner.
For a lot of us, we grew up right alongside Andy, and for him to move on from his childhood and enter that scary thing we call adulthood is super relatable and emotional for a lot of people. It's the perfect ending for both Andy and Woody, and yes, I know Woody technically gets another ending in Toy Story 4, but I'm one of the few people who could do without that unnecessary sequel. Yeah, I said it. If you ask anyone the most emotional opening minutes of any movie, live action or animated, then I think you might see a lot of people answering Up. Yes, if I say to you that Pixar movie that centers around an old man and a junior wilderness explorer filling up enough balloons to lift a house and travel to a far-off land, also starts off with a tragic love story dealing with infertility and lost dreams, you'd break your back with all that tonal whiplash. But Up makes it work. It's a wonderful movie, and its opening works on so many levels. Yes, the kids in the audience can see how sad it is that Ellie passes away and how Carl becomes a grump, but I think the adults are hit even harder by the deeper implications of this opening. To watch Carl and Ellie go through their entire lives together and encounter countless relatable struggles like money issues and infertility, all while just being slightly too busy to go do any of the dreams they set out to do, is just tragic. You'd be forgiven if you spent that time crying in your popcorn. Michael Giacchino also deserves a lot of the credit for this opening montage thanks to his Oscar-winning score. Everything about this opening works and is one of the most iconic emotional sequences in any Pixar movie. I think it's safe to say Coco is a great Pixar movie, right? I mean, really all of them have great things about them unless your main character is a talking tow truck, so I guess that's a redundant statement. But I think Coco has one of the best endings of any Pixar movie. As Hector's on the brink of disappearing forever from the land of the deceased, Miguel makes a final last-minute plea in the real world. He starts playing a slower version of Remember Me, which is what Hector used to sing to Coco when she was little. This is enough to jog Coco's memory and keep Hector around. As kids watch, this is a sweet scene. For any adults, though, who might have had to deal with a parent or an older relative in a similar situation, this is a heavy moment. It's not necessarily emotional because it's sad, but more so because of how triumphant and encouraging this scene is overall. Think back to your imaginary friend you had as a kid. Come on, we all had one. Mine was named Christopher Robin because I liked Winnie the Pooh, and he always ate my cookies. I mean, that's better than my friend Reagan, who had an imaginary friend named Pazuzu, who ended up possessing her and making her head spin around. I mean, they made a movie about it and everything, but never mind, I'm off topic. Anyways, think back to your imaginary friend. Now, picture that imaginary friend sacrificing themselves in order to save you. Yeah, there was a reason why Bing Bong's demise hit us hard. Watching Inside Out as an adult, Bing Bong represents how easy things were before growing up and how imaginative we were as children. Now, as adults, we just sit around and do taxes all day while obsessing over whether our favorite prestige directors like Marvel movies or not. But the imaginary friend era is so pure, and seeing that play out in tragic fashion in Inside Out is one of the biggest sneaky emotional manipulations in recent years. And did you know this scene was conceived to be even sadder in pre-production? My heart couldn't handle that. Okay, look, we're all adults. When watching a kid's movie and the main characters are put in a life-threatening situation, it's hard to feel anything because it's not like everyone is actually in real danger. It's a kid's movie after all. But I will say that this is what's so brilliant about Toy Story 3. When all the toys are in the furnace and they slowly start accepting their fate and realize the only thing they can do is hold hands and be swallowed by fire and flames together, yeah, you get caught up and think, wow, they're actually going to end things this way. I would say this whole scene is emotional for kids and adults on almost equal levels, but I want to include it here because for a moment, every adult is suddenly turned into a wide-eyed, completely invested kid again, watching this scene and crying over the fact that the toys decided to hold hands while they burn. It's a perfect scene, and it's why Toy Story 3 is in my top 3 favorite Pixar for sure. Not every emotional moment on this list is a tragic one. Sometimes we can be emotional because we're overjoyed or happy. Like I'm overjoyed and emotional when you hit that big like and subscribe button. You're probably overjoyed every time you watch Ryan George do a pitch meeting. All I'm saying is there are moments that just wrap around our hearts like warm hugs, and I think the scene in Ratatouille when Ego tries Remy's ratatouille is a perfect example of this. Ego before this was the embodiment of everything we hate about critics, and his nasty attitude made him cold and practically insufferable. But one taste of ratatouille reminded Ego of his childhood. Haven't you had a food or a smell suddenly bring you back to when you were younger? Yeah, it's different for adults than with kids because we can all relate much more to that sequence. Toy Story has always been great in metaphorically stealing your lunch money and shoving you in a locker. By that, I mean it knows how to make you cry. And a heartbreaking instance of that is in Toy Story 2, when Jessie gets her very own flashback complete with a Sarah McLachlan song. Look, if a McLachlan song plays, then the dam preventing my tears immediately breaks and the waterworks fall out. It's why I donated all my money to the ASPCA. Anyways, McLachlan performs the song When She Loved Me, and it shows how Jessie went from her child's best plaything to a forgotten piece of junk on the side of the road as the kid grew up more. And if you didn't feel something there, then I'm sorry, you're a monster. But it's a moment that certainly makes adults think about all the toys they discarded and forgot about when they were kids. The ending of Inside Out is beautiful. When Joy realizes that Riley needs sadness in her life in order to balance out, everything begins to fix itself. But I want to highlight one other moment. It's the part where Riley comes home and her parents are so worried about her. Thanks to Sadness's help, Riley breaks down and tells her parents how much she misses her old home and Minnesota. Yes, it's heartbreaking and a little uplifting at the same time, but can you imagine how the parents must feel? They're already stressed and sad about uprooting their daughter for a better opportunity, and for them to see her cry about how much she misses their old home just is tough to watch for any adult who's had to move their family because of work. Onward is an underrated Pixar movie. I don't think it got enough credit for its clever twist ending, which saw Ian give away his chance to see his dad to his brother Barley because Barley turned out to need it much more, and then have Ian realize that Barley was his father figure throughout his whole life. A strong sibling connection is something that isn't highlighted enough in movies, and it's something adults would understand way more than kids. Like, a lot of kids get to the phase where they're indifferent or bicker with their sibling a lot of the time, and it's only in adulthood that you form a super strong bond, at least in some cases, not everyone obviously. But the way this plays out might appeal more to adults with close siblings than with kids. Dory is the heart and soul of Finding Nemo, and that's no more apparent than at the end. Sure, the movie is packed with emotional moments, but I think the one that would hit adults the hardest is when Marlin is heartbroken over the supposed loss of Nemo and wants to be alone. But Dory talks about how much Marlin helps her remember, and she's terrified of forgetting things. Okay, fine, I'll watch Finding Nemo again if you insist. Really twist my arm.
I'm sorry, Dory.
You know it's an underrated emotional moment? Mike Wazowski fixing Boo's door all by himself for Sully. It was such a selfless thing to do. Seriously, what did Sully ever do for Mike? Just helped him write an award-winning musical? That's about it.